Imagine the most awkward Thanksgiving dinner you've ever experienced. Now multiply that by 1,000. Add several thousand bleeding sheep and throw in divine promises of global dominance. Welcome to the world's first documented case of too much success. The Bible's account of Abraham and Lot's separation in Genesis 13 might seem like a straightforward land dispute between relatives, but critical scholars have uncovered something far more intriguing. An ancient comedic pattern repeated across civilizations that reveals how our ancestors used humor to navigate family conflicts. Before reality TV gave us the Kardashians fighting over designer clothes, the ancient world had Abraham and Lot quarreling over grazing rights. The stakes? Just the future of monotheism and the promised land itself. No pressure. Our story begins with Abraham, still called Abram at this point, who left the comfort of Ur with his nephew Lot in tow. God had promised Abram the land of Canaan, descendants as numerous as the stars, and that all peoples on earth would be blessed through him. A pretty sweet deal, right? There was just one tiny problem. Both Abram and Lot became ridiculously wealthy. We're talking Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk levels of ancient prosperity. Genesis 13 tells us they had so many sheep, goats, and cattle that the land could not support them living together. Soon their herdsmen were at each other's throats. That's our grazing land. No, we were here first. Meanwhile, Uncle Abram is watching this disaster unfold, probably face-palming and thinking, this is not what I signed up for when I followed the divine voice out of Mesopotamia. So what does Abram do? Something shocking for the ancient patriarchal world, something that upends everything we expect from a dominant male figure of his time. He approaches Lot and says, "Let there be no strife between you and me, or between your herdsmen and mine, for we are kinsmen. Is not the whole land before you? Separate yourself from me. If you take the left hand, then I will go to the right. Or if you take the right hand, then I will go to the left." Now here's where the story gets both interesting and ironic. Lot, this kid who's been riding his uncle's coattails, takes a long look at the lush, well-watered Jordan Valley. The text even says it was like the garden of Yahweh, like the land of Egypt. And without a second thought for his elderly uncle, Lot chooses the prime real estate and heads east. Abram gets the leftovers, the hilly, less fertile land of Canaan. Seems like Lot won this round, right? But here's the punchline. The ancient audience would have caught immediately. The narrator mentions that this beautiful Jordan Valley contained Sodom and Gomorrah before Yahweh destroyed them. Talk about foreshadowing. The ancient equivalent of a horror movie where the teenager decides to check out the abandoned cabin in the woods, and the audience collectively groans, "Don't go in there!" But the comedy doesn't end there. The moment Lot disappears over the horizon, guess what happens? God appears to Abram and says, "Lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward and southward and eastward and westward. For all the land you see, I will give to you and your offspring forever." Did you catch that? All the land, including the prime real estate Lot just took. It's as if God was waiting for Lot to clear out before finalizing the divine real estate contract. Abram essentially gets everything anyway, plus the divine equivalent of a cosmic high five for being the bigger man. This isn't just a simple moral tell, it's a masterclass in ancient irony, delivering a cutting punchline. Sometimes what looks like getting a short end of the stick turns out to be the winning move. But here's where it gets truly mind-blowing. Abraham's little family drama isn't unique. Across the ancient world, from Mesopotamia to Greece, from Egypt to India, similar stories were being told. Stories of family members quarreling over property only to find resolution through unexpected wisdom, often with a humorous twist. What critical scholars have discovered is nothing short of astonishing. These weren't just random similar stories. They were part of a sophisticated tradition of using humor and irony to navigate the most explosive social issue of ancient times. Who gets what when families or clans divide? Let's travel to ancient Sumer, where a clay tablet dating back nearly 4,000 years tells us a remarkable similar tale. The characters? Not a man and his nephew, but two gods, Dumuzi the shepherd and Enkidu the farmer, both competing for the hand of the goddess Inanna, and what amounts to the world's first recorded love triangle. Like Abraham and Lot, these two represent the classic tension between herders and farmers. Unlike modern dating shows where contestants might compete in obstacle courses or hot tub makeout sessions, Dumuzi challenges Enkidu with the ancient equivalent of "my livestock is better than your crops" rap battle. If he gives her bread, I'll give her honey cheese. If he offers beer, I'll pour out fine milk. Beans? I'll match with cream. He gives barley, I give wool. But Enkidu, unlike most reality show contestants, doesn't take the bait. Instead, he basically says, "Dude, why are we fighting? Let's not do this. Your sheep can graze in my meadows, drink from my river. We're cool." The resolution, Dumuzi gets the girl, but the rivals end up friends, exchanging gifts and literally hugging it out. No bloodshed, no divine lightning bolts, just a bromance ending worthy of a modern sitcom. Sound familiar? Both stories feature the same core element, a potential conflict over resources diffused through generosity with an unexpected twist at the end. But wait, there's more. The Greeks gave us their own version in the Homeric hymn to Hermes. Picture this: the god Hermes is born at dawn, and by lunchtime, this divine infant has already stolen his half-brother Apollo's sacred cattle. When Apollo tracks the thief to his mother's cave, what does he find? Baby Hermes wrapped in swaddling clothes, playing the innocent newborn. It's the divine version of, who? Me? I was born yesterday, literally. Zeus as their father has to arbitrate this family property dispute. Imagine the king of the gods trying to keep a straight face while one son, Apollo, rages about missing cows, and the other, Hermes, an infant, clutching a lyre he just invented that morning, puts on his best "butter wouldn't melt in my mouth" face. The resolution? Hermes charms Apollo with music from his newly invented lyre. Apollo is so impressed that he lets Hermes keep the cattle in exchange for the musical instrument. They part as friends, the divine family harmony restored. Again, conflict over property, clever negotiation, and everyone ends up satisfied with a touch of humor. It's the same pattern. But if you think that's wild, wait until you hear how the Egyptians handled family feuds in their mythology. The contendings of Horus and Seth tells of a nephew-uncle inheritance dispute that makes modern courtroom dramas look tame by comparison. After Osiris is murdered by his brother Seth, Osiris' son Horus demands his father's throne. The gods hold a trial to decide the rightful heir. But unlike Judge Judy wrapping things up in 30 minutes, this divine court battle drags on for 80 years. The methods they use to settle this dispute, let's just say they're not exactly dignified. At one point, Seth attempts to prove his dominance over Horus through sexual conquest. This backfires spectacularly in what scholars delicately call the lettuce incident, involving a salad that would never make it past TV censors. Raw, the head judge, gets so fed up at one point that he basically says, "I'm going boating, you all figure it out," leaving the courtroom in chaos. Even Osiris, watching from the underworld, starts sending sarcastic threats to release demons if they don't give his son the throne. In the end, Horus gets the throne, Seth gets a consolation prize as god of deserts and storms, and the divine family is technically reconciled, though probably not sending each other holiday cards. Do you see the pattern emerging? Across these ancient cultures, family conflicts over inheritance or property become vehicles for exploring bigger themes of justice, harmony, and compromise, often with a healthy dose of irony or humor. But the pattern doesn't stop at the Mediterranean. Let's journey east to ancient India, where one of the most famous Panchatantra fables tells of two cats who find a piece of bread and immediately starting fighting over how to divide it. As they quarrel without resolution, a clever monkey comes by and offers to mediate. "I'll split it fairly for you," the monkey says, breaking the bread into two pieces, deliberately making one chunk larger than the other. When the cats point out the inequality, the monkey says, "Oops, let me nibble the big piece to even them out." He takes a bite. Now the other piece is bigger, so he takes a bite from that one. Back and forth he goes, evening them out until, you guessed it, he has eaten all the bread, leaving the cats with nothing. The moral? When two quarrel, the third rejoices. Or as we might say today, keep fighting, and some monkey is going to take advantage of both of you. Remember what happened a lot after he separated from Abraham? Genesis 14 tells us he got caught up in someone else's war, captured when kings invaded Sodom, and Abraham had to rescue him. By settling near Sodom apart from Abraham, Lot lost the protection of the united family and got monkeyed by bigger forces. Even the great Indian epic Mahabharata hinges on a failed land division. When the Pandava brothers asked their cousins, the Kauravas, for just 5 villages instead of half the kingdom, the proud Prince Duryodhana retorts he won't give them even as much land as fits on a needlepoint. That stubbornness leads to a catastrophic war that destroys almost everyone. By contrast, Chinese folklore gives us 2 brothers who inherited a field and instead of fighting, each secretly moved the boundary marker at night to give more land to the other out of love. Unbeknownst to each other, they did this repeatedly, puzzled that the boundaries never seemed to change by morning. When their mutual generosity was discovered, their bond became legendary, the opposite of greed and strife, a kind of politeness duel that mirrors Abraham's generous offer to Lot, but with both parties trying to outdo each other in selflessness. From the Jordan Valley to the Ganges, from the Nile to the Yellow River, people told stories about dividing resources without coming to blows, and they knew such situations were ripe for satire, because we all recognize ourselves in those moments of petty squabble. Now for the truly provocative question. Why do all these ancient cultures share such similar stories? Is it mere coincidence, universal human experience, or something more deliberate? Critical scholars have uncovered something fascinating. The final form of Genesis, as we know it, was likely compiled during or after the Babylonian exile, into the Persian and Hellenistic period, when Israelites had extensive contact with other cultures. By the time Genesis reached its final form, Greek literature like Hesiod and Homer were already circulating throughout the Eastern Mediterranean. Mesopotamian myths were well known in the ancient Near East. Egyptian wisdom literature had spread beyond the Nile. What these scholars suggest is revolutionary. The biblical authors weren't writing in isolation. They were engaged in a sophisticated cross-cultural conversation, responding to and adapting motifs known throughout their world. Biblical and classical scholar Philip Wagenbaum goes further, proposing that Hebrew scribes were deliberately in conversation with Greek traditions. It's as if a Judean scribe thought that Greeks have all these epics about feuding brothers killing each other over inheritance. How about we tell a story where the feud doesn't happen because the patriarch is wise enough to avoid it? Assyriologist Mario Liverani offers another provocative layer, a historical and ideological reading. He sees tales like Abraham and Lot's separation as later Israelite authors' creative way to explain and justify real-world relationships between peoples. In Liverani's view, Abraham represents Israel's ancestor with a divine land grant, whereas Lot becomes the ancestor to the Moabites and Ammonites, Israel's neighbors across the Jordan. The story legitimizes territorial boundaries without overt aggression. It's almost a gentle geopolitical satire, Cousin Moab, remember how we agreed you'd settle over there and we over here? All good, yes? What could have been serious political contention is disarmed as a fraternal handshake. The brilliant subtlety is that it's a satirical counter-narrative to violent conquest myths. The patriarch doesn't seize land by sword, he obtains it through generosity and divine favor. A quiet challenge to more belligerent origin stories of other nations. None of this is accidental. Ancient writers knew the power of comedy to sugarcoat a pill of truth. A family squabble resolved by humility is a much more palatable moral lesson than a stern lecture about greed. What's truly shocking is how relevant these ancient comic narratives remain. Whether it's siblings dividing an inheritance, business partners splitting assets, or nations negotiating borders, we still face the same fundamental challenges our ancestors did thousands of years ago. These aren't just quaint old stories. They're sophisticated models of conflict resolution wrapped in humor to make them memorable and effective. The punchline of Abraham and Lot's story: the greedy one gets immediate gratification, but long-term trouble, while the generous one ultimately receives everything, is as pointed today as it was 2,500 years ago. What these ancient storytellers understood, from Israel to India, from Greece to Egypt, is that humor provides perspective. When we can laugh at our petty squabbles over stuff, we're already halfway to resolving them. The irony in Abraham and Lot's story is delicious. Lot chooses what looks like paradise, only to end up in Sodom just before its destruction. Abraham accepts the less fertile hills, but ultimately receives divine confirmation that all the land, including Lot's portion, will belong to his descendants. Each culture puts its own spin on this universal human drama. In Mesopotamia, divine rivals end their contest with gifts and brotherhood. In Greece, clever negotiation turns theft into a win-win exchange. In Egypt, even cosmic battles for the throne include absurdist humor. In India, fables warn that quarreling parties often lose to a third opportunist. In China, mutual generosity becomes the highest expression of kinship. The evidence forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Our modern world remains plagued by the inability to resolve conflicts over resources and territories. We've advanced technologically beyond our ancestors' wildest dreams, yet we still struggle with the basic wisdom they encoded in these ancient cosmic narratives. Whether it's Abraham and Lot dividing grazing lands, Dumuzi and Enkidu sharing fields and pastures, Apollo and Hermes exchanging cattle for music, Horus and Seth accepting their respective domains, or two cats losing everything to a monkey mediator, the message echoes across the world. The choice is always before us. Fight over the seemingly better portion and risk everything, or find the wisdom to compromise, the courage to be generous, and the perspective to laugh at our own acquisitive nature. Perhaps the most radical aspect of Abraham's story isn't just that he chose peace over conflict. It's that the biblical authors had the audacity to suggest that generosity and compromise might be divine attributes, worthy of emulation by anyone seeking to build a just society. What would our world look like if we approached our conflicts with the same ironic self-awareness as these ancient stories? What if we could see the humor in our territorial squabbles before they escalate into genuine hostility? The ancient scribes who crafted these narratives weren't just entertaining their audiences. They were offering us a profound philosophical challenge, wrapped in a chuckle. The punchline isn't just that Lot chose poorly or that Abraham won in the end. The real joke is on all of us who thousands of years later still haven't fully grasped the wisdom hidden in these ancient comic gems. That sometimes the path to getting everything you truly need begins with the willingness to walk away from what merely seemed desirable in the moment. Sometimes the half is greater than the whole.